Hi guys, Kiran Reddy Abdullah here. Day one of Project 365 Days of Teaching Cloud Technology and Linux to you guys. So in the first part, we are going to get started with the basics of Linux, where we are going to understand what is exactly Linux and how has Linux has evolved over the years and why should we use Linux? Yeah. So getting started, now we are going to understand how exactly Linux has evolved. So we're going to understand the birth of Linux. So in the year 1969, the first programming language, C, was written. And out of C, the first operating system, Unix, was created. And this was created from the organization called as AT&T, American Techniques and Technologies. So slowly in the years of 1970, the growth of Unix became very popular because of open source collaboration. Now, when I say open source, when we buy the operating system, when we buy the operating system, along with the operating system, we get the complete license of the operating system, or we get the complete source code for the operating system, so that in order we can go ahead, we can modify the operating system and we can create our own operating system. So due to this reason, slowly Unix started gaining its popularity, and companies like IBM, Solaris, HP, they purchased the Unix operating system and they started creating their own version of Unix operating system. So that is how we have IBM AIX, Sun OS from Solaris, and HP UX. And again, these operating systems are very limited to only the organization's use. But in the mid 1980s, so here, a group of developers, now they wanted to have the operating system shared across the entire world for free. They did not like the idea of the operating system being charged or the operating system being limited for the people who only buy it. So that is where the birth of free software movement has started, and that is where the creation of GNU project, the GNU project has happened. So under this GNU project, the person named as Linus Torvalds, who's known as the father of Linux, along with the help of GNU project, they purchased the Unix operating system. Okay, they bought the Unix operating system, and to this Unix operating system, Linus Torvalds, what he did was he added something called as a Linux kernel. So what is Linux, guys? Linux is a kernel. Linux is not an operating system. Linux is a kernel that was added, that was purchased. They purchased the Unix operating system and they added Linux kernel to this operating system. And that is how the usage or the creation of Linux plus GNU came into existence. So here, talking about Linux, Linux is not a operating system. Linux is a kernel. Hmm. You see this? The Linux kernel is a free and open source monolithic modular multitask Unix-like operating system kernel. So guys, be careful. So tomorrow when you go for interviews and when somebody asks you what is exactly Linux, now you know how to answer. Linux is a kernel. Kernel is nothing but an intermediate layer. Let me take example of this picture. Yeah. So a kernel is nothing but an intermediate layer that lies between the operating system and the hardware resources. So whenever we give an input, the input is sent to the kernel. From the kernel, it is sent to the operating system. Once the operating system executes the process, the output is sent to the kernel, and again, the output is displayed on our device. So what is Linux? Linux is a kernel. GNU plus Linux is the operating system. Now, once these guys have created their own operating system with the idea of Unix, what they started doing is they started distributing this operating system for free. That's right, guys. They started distributing this operating system for free. So once it became free, well, a lot of developer communities across the world, they started using their Linux operating system, or they started using this GNU Linux operating system in order to create their own versions. So that is how Linux has multiple distributions, guys. Yeah, distributions in the sense that is how Linux has multiple different features or the multiple different versions. Now, talking about why should we use Linux? So here, this is what we need to understand, guys, or what are the features of Linux. First thing, simplified updates for all installed software. Well, updating software on a Linux is very easy. And Linux, of course, it offers free software licensing. We do not have to pay for the software. I can simply go to the GNU website. I can start downloading the operating system. We have access to the complete source code. Well, once you get the operating system, you have the access to the complete source code. You can modify it. You can create your own version. And that is how it has multiple different distributions or multiple different versions. As I said, different developer communities across the world, they started going ahead, they started developing their own operating system, and it offers better malware protection. So Linux is the most secured operating system compared to other operating systems in the world. So talking about why should we use Linux? Yes, why should we use Linux? So these are some of the reasons to use Linux, guys. First thing, low cost and very stable. Some Linux servers are not rebooted for over a year. That's right, guys. So even if I do not reboot the Linux server for over a year, nothing is going to happen. But if we try that with Windows, it's not going to work out. It offers best computing power and inbuilt network support. This is the fastest developing operating system with the most number of developers. Well, as I said, the developing community is very huge. There are a lot of developers across the world who are going ahead, who are contributing to this operating system. And this is the most secured operating system that offers configurability, convenience, and freedom. As I said, you can go ahead, you can create your own operating system, you can modify the operating system, and you can launch your own version out of this Linux operating system. So guys, now understanding some basic differences between Unix and Linux. So here, now there are a lot of differences, guys, but I want to speak about some of the most common differences in Unix and Linux. So first thing, talking about Linux, it's an open source operating system which is freely available to everyone. As I said, Linux is free to use for everyone. And here about Unix, it is only available for its copywriters. So the source code or the license is only available for the copywriters or for the ones who go ahead, who purchase the operating system. Talking about distributions, it has different distributions like Ubuntu, Red Hat, Fedora. So these are some of the most popular distributions in Linux. And coming to Unix, Unix has IBM AIX, HP UX, and Sun Solaris. Okay, so these distributions are only limited to organization specific, right? We would never see these distributions in the open market. Yeah. So this is something that you need to understand. And moving on to some of the most important differences here. You see this? This is what I wanted to highlight. Linux is just the kernel. Get it, guys? Linux is just the kernel. GNU plus Linux is the operating system, and Unix is a complete package of the operating system. Got it? So Linux is just a kernel, but Unix is a complete package of the operating system. And coming to the security, Linux has about 60 to 100 viruses that has listed over till date. Unix has about 85 to 120 viruses that are listed towards till date. And coming to problem solving and error detection, if there is any kind of virus that has been detected, or if there is any kind of threat that has been detected, the fix it on Linux happens really quick. In Unix, if the problem is detected, well, to fix this, it is going to take some time because it has to send to the developers across the AT&T team. They have to analyze it, they have to fix it. But in Linux, as it is open source, as soon as there is an error that has been popped out, different developer communities across the globe, they go ahead, they start working on it, and that's how the errors get fixed really soon. Now, talking about different distributions, as I said, Linux has multiple different versions. So talking about different distributions of Linux. So here are some of the most popularly used different distributions here, guys. So here we can look at it. We have Ubuntu, we have Fedora, we have Mint, OpenSUSE, Debian, Mandriva, Puppy Linux. Sabian, Arch Linux, CentOS. So these are the different distributions in Linux. Now the question is, how are we going to get these different distributions, or where are we going to get these different distributions, or how to choose which distribution to use? Yes, this is a major point. Which distribution are we supposed to use as a fresher? Or which distribution are you supposed to use as a professional? So this is what we're going to look at here. So talking about distributions, coming to Ubuntu, it works just like Mac OS and it is very easy to use. Linux Mint, it works like Windows and it should be used by newcomers. Debian, it provides stability, but it is not recommended for new users because you have to manually install every application or every process that you need. Fedora, if you want to use Red Hat and the latest software, well, that's your choice. Red Hat Enterprise, now this is purely for commercial usage. Coming to CentOS, if you want to use Red Hat, but without its trademark. OpenSUSE, it works the same as Fedora, but it is slightly older and more stable. And coming to Arch Linux, it is not for beginners because, again, as I said, every package has to be installed by yourself, just like Debian. So these are the different versions in Linux, guys, but these different versions are primarily divided into two different families, or primarily divided into two different groups. So one is the Red Hat family, and the other one is the Debian-based family. So now we are going to understand what is the difference between these two different families. And the major part is now, how are we going to get a Linux machine, or how are we going to create a Linux machine? So that we are going to understand in the next part, or in the day 2 of Project 365 of learning cloud technology. So kindly like, share, and follow the video. And see you guys in the day 2 of Project 365 of learning technology. Thank you. Jai Sri Krishna.